All right, welcome back to another live stream here on Free Will Photos. Today, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at the differences between ON1 Photo Raw and Lightroom Classic. Now, if you are interested in picking up ON1 Photo Raw, then you can use the coupon code FreeWillPhotos20 to save 20% at checkout. I do get a small commission, and those commissions help me continue to make these contents. Wow, that's terrible English. That helps me continue to make the content here on this channel. I'm a real person, guys. And also, if you are on Vero, which I think is a really cool app, I'd love to connect with you there. So send me a message at Free Will Photos and share your work and things of that sort. So I'm going to jump into the computer and I just want to go over a chart. Now, before everyone's blood starts to boil and, some people get a little upset, what I want to do here is not say that I'm telling you that Lightroom is better than ON1 or ON1 is better than Lightroom or anything of that sort. Instead, really what I want to do is show you the things that you get with ON1, and this diagram is not exhaustive by any means, okay? I'm not telling you that this is everything that ON1 can do, and I know that I don't have everything that Lightroom can do listed over there. And this is a work in progress. So what I would ask for the community is drop in the comment section as you look over this list. If you notice that I missed something, let me know, and I'm going to continue to build this list. And, this is our way, or at least my way, that I want to show the differences between ON1 and Lightroom. And today, what we're going to be focusing on is really here in the middle segment of the ON1 program, because that's where, it's the similarities where people are trying to migrate from Lightroom and move over to ON1, not quite sure how that's going to work. So I just wanted to help show how you can move from Lightroom to ON1 as seamlessly as possible. But I just got to be upfront. Just because something is listed on this particular Venn diagram does not mean that it's going to work the same way that it does in Lightroom. And I'm not going to have that, that's a very heated debate and conversation, I think. And I'm not going to go into that for today's content, but please feel free to share whatever your experiences are with either one of these programs and down in the comment section below. And then, of course, if you feel like, you're like, hey, I'm looking to make that jump from Lightroom to ON1 Photo Raw, then, let me know what you're most concerned about moving from Lightroom over to ON1. And then as a community, maybe we can help you make that decision. I personally made the jump back in 2020-ish when ON1 2021 came out. And for a very long time, I did not have an Adobe subscription. I recently got my Adobe subscription for other reasons, not because ON1 doesn't do what I want it to do, but because of the business that I was trying to run, ON1 just isn't quite there for that. But for my personal work and even a lot of professional work that I don't have to have a quick turn on, ON1 does work out. So let's go ahead and dive into the content. Now, I do need to pull up one thing here, which is this document. I just need to pull it up on the other screen so I kind of stay on track, because I don't want to ramble. I want to be very targeted about what it is that we're going to be looking at. So I'm not going to jump into keywords. I'm just going to look at the editing piece, because I think that's where a lot of people are most concerned with, like, hey, how do I edit an image inside of ON1 versus using Lightroom Classic? So here we have a few filters. And if you're not familiar with ON1, that's okay. Just know that this is the main editing page when you get a document or a file and you either double click or you click on edit. This is what your edit window looks like. Okay. Then we came over here to the effects tab, and I'm not going to go over the develop tab for this particular video because there's already a tone enhancer in here, and this gives you the most relatable version of exposing your image. And I kind of laid this out based off of how the Lightroom module is, but I'll talk about some similarities and also some benefits and maybe even some drawbacks. So the first filter here is the tone enhancer. And obviously I can migrate my exposure just like you would inside of Lightroom. I don't think this is too impressive or something that's like entirely different, right? I think you'll feel right at home if you got this. What's cool here though, inside of ON1, you can do different styles for each effect that's inside of the add filter. Okay. So if I were to hit this drop down, I have a few filter styles here, and I can just kind of hover over these and it's going to give me that look. I can also use my down arrow and kind of just cycle through these. So I can easily sample my exposure or whatever I want my tone to look like. I can easily just start filtering through this. So this is, in my opinion, a benefit, because if you want to only focus on your tone in your image and not so much a preset, which we'll get to that a little bit later, you can do that just by adding in one of these presets here that are, or the style adjustments for the tone enhancer. Now, I am going to leave that alone because that's, or actually, I'll just go ahead and select one. I'll go with my R6 tone enhancer because I shot this on my EOS R6 if you look up here in the info section. So this is like where I like to start with my tones with the camera profile that I have set on my Canon R6. So this works out for me quite well, and I get to do this on all of my images. All right, if I so choose. Now, what's cool about the tone enhancer is you get a curves module, and I am skipping over some things because I want to keep this as similar to Lightroom as possible. All right, you get a curves module, and as you can see here, I made a little bit of a S curve inside of this tone, and I don't think I changed anything in the channels for this particular preset, but I do have a few presets where I was able to change this inside the, or change channels and the way that the colors are displayed on the image inside of that preset. But I'm not doing that here tonight. So that is the tone enhancer. I think that's very easy. That's like very straightforward, right? So I'm not going to continue to belabor that point. Now, what I will mention though is on here is an opacity slider. If I, for whatever reason, think like, hey, this is way too strong, I can just pull down on the opacity. And now I'm blending in that original look with the with 34% of this tone enhancer adjustment or style that I just applied. So I think that, you know, this is a huge benefit because this doesn't exist in Lightroom, but you have that flexibility here inside of ON1. So, and then a little bit later, we'll get into the settings for each one of these filters. So the next one here is the curves filter. Now, if you want to modify the curve, but you don't want to modify the colors inside of your image, well, ON1 has the option. If you click this little gear icon, you can change your blend option just for this filter. And this is amazing because, again, it's not inside of Lightroom, and I'm not here to try and oversell ON1 compared to Lightroom. I'm just helping anyone who is on the fence and they're like, hey, I don't know if I can even edit inside of ON1. Well, you can click on Luminosity here. All right. And it's going to allow you to only modify the tone. So I'm not modifying any of the colors, and I just made a basic S curve again, which is kind of duplicating what was happening in the R6 tone module. But this time it's just a little bit different. Not a big deal, just something that I wanted to show. But the good news here is if I come back up here and I go to normal, you see how it's more saturated when I modify the tone curve on the normal blend mode. Well, if I come to luminosity, it's only going to impact those luminance values. So this is just one of those cool things inside of ON1, and you have those blend options for every effect that's inside of the filter here. So that's just a huge bonus, in my opinion, between Lightroom and ON1, in ON1's favor. Then the next thing that you have here, this is a color enhancer. This is very similar to the HSL inside of Lightroom. So if you want to modify the hue, saturation, and brightness based off of the color channel, then you can go ahead, or a color range, I should say. Then you can click through here and you see that you get the hue, saturation, and brightness. So if that's something that you do a lot of, just rest assured that you have the capability of doing that inside of ON1. But the benefit of ON1 is if I wanted to, I can hit add filter and I can add an additional color enhancer. So now I have 2 color enhancers on my image. Now, why you would want to do that, I don't know, for creative purposes. But one of the benefits to ON1 versus Lightroom is that you can mask in these adjustments. So if I want to work with the sky, or the foreground element here, and there's greens and yellows and oranges, but I only want it to mask a certain way inside of this foreground, then what I can do, and I'm just going to make something like completely drastic here. I'm just going to desaturate all of these and even desaturate some of these reds because I think there's some reds in there. All right. And I only want this applied down here, but in the sky, let's say that I want more blues, right? And let's pretend that there were actually blue things in the foreground. Well, if I start to mask this away, then what I'm going to do, because works just like any other mask. So if you're familiar with using Photoshop, this is just like Photoshop, where white shows the effect that you're trying to apply, and black, if I hit Shift X or invert this, black hides the effect. So essentially, I'm just going to make my brush size a little bit larger here. If I paint this in, you can see I've just painted in that effect. Well, what if I didn't want the effect down here, but only up here? That's where having 2 color enhancers would come in, because I can mask one color enhancer one way and the other one a different way. So just food for thought on that. Now that's the color enhancer. Again, no real difference other than the fact that you can use a mask directly on it, as well as you can use your blend options to change the way that the colors blend. So maybe if you don't want to mess with any of the luminance values, even though you have HSL, so I don't know why you wouldn't want to, but you can just bring this down to color, and it's only going to affect the color, or just the saturation, or just the hue. Okay. And then of course, if you want to make it a little bit more contrasty when you modify the color, you can modify the contrast. And now the color is blending with the contrast, because I think I put this at soft light, right? Yeah, soft light. So that's one of the contrast type of blend modes. A huge benefit that is available inside of ON1 that isn't so much available inside of Lightroom, or if at all, because there's no blend modes. All right, so the next thing is color grading. Now, the tool that ON1 has for color grading is not my favorite tool. All right, it is probably my least favorite tool, just because I found a better way of doing color grades. But if you want it to color grade, I can just pull up on the amount here, and I'm in the highlights, and then I can just pull my hue around until I find a color that I want. what I don't like about this is the fact that I can't double click here and choose a color like I can with a photo filter. But again, I don't want to make this overly complicated because there are a lot of opportunities inside of ON1 that allow this to be a much more savvy program for edits, like advanced edits at least. All right. And even basic edits. But the point that I want to show here is I can easily come through and modify my, like get a color grade going for my image based off of what I want. And there's all these style presets that I can just filter through and really choose what type I want. Okay. So maybe I really like this vivid, cool look, right? Looks kind of good on this. But again, if it's too strong and I'm like, no, I need to blend this with the rest of my image, I can just pull this down. And now if I turn that off and on, I can really see how well it's blending with the image. And, you know, this is just a good way of working as opposed to what you would get inside of Lightroom. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off and we'll minimize it. And then we'll come to split toning. Now, split toning, I think, is pretty straightforward. Everyone understands split toning, or if you don't, then that's okay. I'm going to explain it here in a little bit. Split toning is similar to color grading, except for there's no midtones. There's only highlights, which are the brightest pixels in your image, and then there's shadows, which are the darkest or the darker pixels in your image. All right. You can apply a color using a split tone. You can apply a color to that. So I'm going to go with this teal look. And what this has done is it has applied this neon yellow green looking color to my highlights. And in my shadows, I get like this teal blue green looking color, which that could be very satisfying or what you want for your image, or it could not be. But I can also flip these. So now I have that color that was once in my shadows. I have it now in my highlights, but maybe I don't want to change this now, or I'm sorry, maybe I want to change this to a very specific color. I can double click here and I'm on a Mac, and on a PC, it's going to look very similar to this. Okay. So don't be alarmed if you're on a PC and you're like, whoa, I don't have that kind of color wheel. You have more of the spectrum approach or look, which looks kind of like this. But I like to use the color wheel and the RGB sliders. Moral of the story, I can just pull this around and I can select whatever color I want to add. And I don't have to rely on this little slider. I can look at the wheel. Now, if you have a very specific hex code or hex color that you want to apply, ON1 allows you to add that hex color. Now, or traditionally, you would have to send something like this to Photoshop if you want to get to a hex color and, you know, really tie that into the highlights and stuff of that sort. But ON1 just gives that to you right here inside of the split toning capability. Now, again, there's no color gradient map tool built into ON1. So you can't use the hex code with this color grade option that I have here, which is actually called color balance. It's this tool right here called color balance. I just renamed it to color grading so that way it's more familiar to anyone who's moving from Lightroom to ON1. But the point that I want to make here is you can use split toning just like you would in any other program and it would work just fine. And if you're not familiar with that, then just drop it down in the comment section below and I would be more than happy to explain that or, you know, make a completely separate video about it. Okay, so now we get into some of the things that I wouldn't necessarily recommend you do inside of the effects module. But if you like the simple approach that you get inside of Lightroom where, you know, you just kind of start working down your stack of processes, well, sharpening is one of those, or details, whatever. you can add some sharpening here. Now this is way too much. Again, you get the opacity and you can, make do with that. I'm not going to go into the sharpening because I don't think that this is the best place to add it when you're using ON1 Photo Raw. And then of course, noise reduction falls into the exact same category. I don't believe this is the best place to add noise reduction whenever you're using ON1 Photo Raw. And I'll show you where the better place is here in a second. But with the noise reduction, you can just remove, all the noise that's in your image. And this does work pretty decent. But yeah, I'm just going to skip past that again. Sorry, just trying to minimize this. And then of course you have a black and white filter. And the black and white filter, again, coming with all of these styles, you can really make some cool edits inside of ON1 that Lightroom uses the camera profiles to make the black and whites, while ON1 uses the black and white filter here to make a style and effect. And you can see some of these even add in grain. So this is almost like a preset by itself, but it's only a preset specific to the filter. All right. And I'll show you why that's important to make a distinct difference out of, because if you look over on the left, this is where all of the presets are stored. Now, this is a collection of a bunch of different things, and I don't want to jump too far ahead because I am going to talk about presets towards the back end of the stream here. But the point that I really want to make here is inside of ON1, you can really just go through these and make whatever type of image that you want, and you have a lot of latitude and flexibility. The reason for that is it's combining Photoshop and Lightroom into one program. All right. Now I'm going to close that out, or minimize that, I should say. And we'll come up here to the top where it says layers. Now, when I click this, you see it collapses this area. Underneath layers, I have all of these, or right now I only have one layer. But if I were to duplicate this, now, once my computer catches up, I have two layers of the exact same thing, okay? So if I go to the effects, I'm on the second layer, and I'll rename this real quick. And we'll just call this layer 2. And we'll call this layer 1. Okay. So now I've created a layered image. Inside of here, if I were to save this, it would create a .on photo file, which not a problem. This can be opened, or let me rephrase. You can save this as a PSD, and then you can open each of these layers inside of Affinity Photo or Photoshop if you happen to work here. But again, that's if you need to work in a layer base. The reason why I bring up layers, or why I'm talking about them, is mostly because this is something where you can really start to hone in on making some things. So if I were to click on this particular mask, and I'm going to hit the letter K to get the super select, which is the new AI feature, and I'll click the sky, and I'll just hit, or probably should not have done that. We're actually going to go to the mask, and then we'll use the AI masking tool, which uses the exact same image as the Super Select AI. And I am going to paint out the sky. So the sky is no longer going to be inside of this image. So if I were to turn off the top layer here, or the bottom layer, you can see I no longer have a sky in this particular image. So on a layer where there's no sky, if I were to come back onto this layer. I'm going back to layer 1. What I can do is click on local, and this is a little bit more of an advanced technique, but just to show you, like, you can work in this as if it were Photoshop. I'm going to hit paint with color, and I'm going to grab this like a blue color here. And remember, I'm on layer 1. So if I make my brush size a little bit larger and I start painting on layer 1, you'll see the sky show up in the actual sky area. But if I paint down here, you notice that it's not actually painting anything. And that's because I'm working in a layer base stack. All right. Now, that again is a very unique case that you would ever do that. But if I were to turn off this layer, you can see that I'm just protecting the sky, or I'm masking over the sky. Now, I don't actually want to do any of that, so I'm going to delete some of these layers, so that way we can get back to some of the other features that I want to show. So we'll delete that, and we'll come over here and just delete this entire paint local adjustment layer. Okay, so we've gone over effects, we've gone over layers. One of the other pieces that are very similar to Lightroom when you're making the transition is making these snapshots. So what I'm going to do is I am going to click on this. I'm just going to select a preset. Doesn't really matter what the preset is, because all of these presets are going to be over here modifying the effects. And now what I'm going to do is come to the snapshot pane, which is up here, and I'm going to create a new snapshot. Now, if you've used Lightroom, then you know that snapshots are a really cool way to just sample different things. So I got the modern black and white. That's snap 1. We'll come over here to the color grade category, and I just want to choose something that's like that stands out. So we'll go with this one. It changes the entire preset, or the effect stack. It changes the entire effect stack, and then I can hit snapshot, and we'll label this snap 2, and then we'll come out of color grade. And I like the dark forest presets, some of my favorite presets in ON1. So we'll click this one, and we'll add another snap 3, and hit OK. And notice I'm just jumping between all of these preset categories. Some ship with ON1, some are part of the ON1 Plus package or subscription that I'm a part of, that I've downloaded from. So I'll click there, and then we'll hit add new, and we'll call this snap 4. Okay, so I have just gone through 4 different presets. So if I go back to the original, I'm going to click on original. This has no effects on it whatsoever. All right. And I ran through 4 different presets. I don't remember all the presets, because maybe you're in the middle of editing the photo and you're like, you know what, I have another creative idea. I have multiple creative ideas. And then you're like, oh man, but I don't want to make multiple versions of this particular image, which you can make versions in ON1 if that's something that you use from Lightroom. I'm going to click on snap 1, and maybe this is my first look. Snap 1. There we go. I knew it was black and white. I didn't know why it didn't go. So snap 1, it's a black and white. And I'm like, okay, I'm kind of feeling that. I wonder what my second one was. So I'll click on snap 2. Oh, okay. So I had like this color faded vibe look. Okay, maybe. And then snap 3. Oh yeah, I faded it even more, added in a little bit more reds, stuff like that, right? And then snap 4. And you can choose very quickly by moving through all of these different images, snaps, or snapshots of your effect stack. Now, mind you, it's not just the effects here. In fact, the snaps, it captures everything that is inside of these tabs down here. So the develop, the portrait, and the local, or I'm sorry, develop, effects, sky, portrait, and local. So if you make any change under any of these, like for instance, I'll just change this to camera portrait. Doesn't have to make sense for this tutorial. And I think this is snap 4. So what I'm going to do is right click on snap 4 and I'm going to click update snap with current settings. All right. And it's just telling me updating a snap with the current settings cannot be undone. So you better be confident that this is what you want to do. And I do. So I'm just going to hit OK. And now that snap is updated with the camera profile for camera portrait. So if I come over here to snap 2 and you notice in develop, it moves it to ON1 standard. So being on ON1 standard, and then if I go back to snap 4 where I change that camera profile, you see that it's updating the camera portrait profile right there. This is super powerful, not something that I believe is available inside of Lightroom. If I'm wrong, please let me know in the comment section below. I have no problem with being corrected when I am wrong. So let me go ahead and reset all because I want to show you the sharpening and the noise reduction. So under the develop tab or develop module, however you want to look at it, there is noise and sharpening. There is the classic, which I don't recommend you use. If you're going to use the noise reduction software inside of ON1, I don't recommend that you use the classic version. I recommend that you come to No Noise AI. All right. So I'm going to click on this. I don't think there would have been any chance of noise getting into this image, or I don't believe. Yeah, I shot this at ISO 100. So this isn't really doing much, or if anything at all, to the overall image. All right. So I'm not going to run through noise reduction on this image because there's nothing to reduce the noise on. All right. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and hit classic. And then the next thing would be Tack Sharp AI. Now this is new, only found in ON1 Photo Raw 2023. So if you click on Tack Sharp AI, what it's going to do is try and find the portions of the image that just weren't quite in focus and put them into focus. So on this one, it thinks that the corn stalks in the back are out of focus. So it's putting a lot of contrast. Now, this is one of those areas where I just got to be real with everyone. Tack Sharp AI adds a ton of artifacts. And this is not one of the places I think that ON1 2023 shines entirely. I think it can get better, but there are a ton of artifacts. And mind you, I have the AI all the way turned up. So in ON1's defense, I think you want to pull this down probably somewhere under 50. And then we should see those artifacts kind of go away. But you know, you gotta play with it to figure out the best formula. And I'm still testing this one out. But you see that some of those artifacts went away when I pulled this down to 29. Now, I don't think that there was much that needed to be sharpened in this image. So that could be the other reason why there's not much happening or why all those artifacts came about. But because there's this layer-based system, this is also one of those things you may want to consider creating a separate layer and then masking in the areas that you want to actually sharpen. All right. But again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself in here. So I'm going to take a quick pause and get some water. Okay. And I see we got a comment. The same thing's happening. Sorry. The same thing is happening inside of DxO as well, as far as the sharpening goes. So yeah, thank you for that. Because yeah, it's one of those things that the AI software, I think it's great. I'm not going to harp on any of this because the goal here tonight is really just to share that these are tools available inside of ON1 if you're looking to make that jump from Lightroom, primarily because of the pricing model. That's why many people are looking to leave Lightroom. I haven't heard of anyone, and please, anyone in the comments, let me know. But I haven't heard of anyone leaving Lightroom because of the way that it works. Most people say, I want to leave Adobe and the subscription because I don't like the way, I don't want to pay for my photo editing software. They want to own it outright. And I think that that's completely fair. But I don't know of anyone who is like, yeah, I'm leaving Adobe because Lightroom just sucks. It doesn't work. I haven't ran into anyone who has said that yet. But maybe you're watching this now and you're going to be the first one to put that in the comment section for me. All right. So local adjustments. This is one of those things that Lightroom used to be the king of the hill for, and they were just like on fire. No one could beat them when it came to local adjustments. And to some point, local adjustments are not entirely isolated to Lightroom anymore. There's a lot of programs that are using this local adjustment base. ON1 has its own local adjustment response to Lightroom. But let me take a look at the comments here for a quick second. Make sure I'm keeping up with those. Sean says, I noticed that Tack Sharp made my photo crunchy. Yeah, it does make the photos a little crunchy. Yeah, and renting software completely got that. And then Daniela said that she stopped using Lightroom, but not Photoshop. Okay. Yeah. And that's fair, right? Like, Lightroom is one of those things that you can use it to modify your images, get your base edit, and then Photoshop, you can really take an image to the next level. So hopefully with ON1, you can see the potential that maybe you won't need to go into Photoshop entirely. ON1 is not a replacement for Photoshop. Let me just be very clear there. Photoshop, it does a very distinct thing and it does it very well. And there's a reason that Photoshop is the standard for the industry and has been for a very long time. It is the undisputed champion of photo editing for raster images. But as far as the raw processor goes, I think the arena is starting to widen, and Lightroom is not the clear forerunner as much as it once was. But again, that's just my opinion. Local adjustments. So ON1 has its own local adjustments module, and it's over here on the far right. Now, you can do a ton of different things, and I'll show you the basics, which most people want to use a radial adjustment tool. Well, if you hit the letter M on your keyboard and you get what's known as the masking bug, you can click over here. I'm sorry. Here, let me just delete that. Getting ahead of myself. And I need to invert. Okay. So if I hit the letter M on my keyboard, when I select the local adjustments, I can get my masking bug. And this gives me the option to either grab a vignette or a linear tool, either top to bottom, left to right, things of that sort. All right. For the radial, you want to click on vignette, and then the shape, I always get these confused. I still get these confused, and I've been using ON1 for a very long time. Doesn't absolutely matter because you can always invert the mask. But if you click center, it's going to apply the effect to the center of your, it's going to protect the center of your image. So if I click there, you can see that the adjustment of the -1 on the exposure, it's on the outside of the image. So this creates like that vignette, and the center of my radial tool is being protected. All right. However, if I'm like, well, no, that's not what I wanted, I can just hit invert over here. And now I'm applying that -1 exposure on the left-hand side here. All right. I'm sorry, on the left-hand side, on the center of the image, or in the center of the radial, which is not what I want. Okay. So I'm just going to reset that for a second there. And you can resize this. I'm sorry, I didn't even show that. You could resize this to make it smaller. You can feather. Sometimes it jumps around, so you got to be careful, but you could feather this out. You can do all kinds of stuff. Where this does differ a little bit is if I draw in another radial tool, you'll notice that what it's actually doing is not like in Lightroom, where you can put multiple radial tools or radial filters all over on the image. Like if I wanted to put a spot of light here, spot of light there, what this is actually doing is if I invert this, and I might actually be able to make this, as I work more and more with this. So we'll make these smaller. So now I'm putting and I'll decrease this even more so you can really see what I'm doing. I'm essentially punching holes all over in my image in order for this to pop up, and don't worry about that over there. That's just giving a quick display of how you can do this. But the point that I want to make here is if you want to make local adjustments like you do inside of Lightroom, you can do that. All right. And then, of course, if I'm like, hey, the radial tool didn't quite get it, I hit the letter B and get my brush, and then I could just paint this all over and just paint this wherever I want. And notice how it updates my mask. If I hit the letter O, I can see what the mask looks like. If I hit the O key again, it will hide the mask. So hopefully that makes sense there. Let me take a look at the comments, make sure I'm keeping up with those. Sean said he switched to ON1 in 2017 from Lightroom and have no regrets. Yeah, I have no regrets either, other than the fact that I needed to go to Photoshop because the headshot business that I'm trying to run, it requires me to have Photoshop so I can work with other clients and industries as I start to build that out. So the downside to jumping to ON1 is that there's not too many people that use it. So you have to find a way to be creative with working with everyone else who's in the creative space that's using Adobe suites or the Adobe suite. But that's just, my thing that I got to deal with. Let's see, Daniela, she says, using Fujifilm RAW files or RAW files, I can say that when you see your photos, ON1 makes a great job, even better than Capture One. Yeah, so I want to get a Fujifilm camera. I just have not made the decision on which one. Everyone keeps telling me about these JPEG film simulations, so I would love to try that out, or at least get a Fuji camera and try out the edits inside of ON1. So thank you for sharing. And then Sean says, invert mask is very helpful. Yeah, I hit this button more times in ON1 than you would even imagine. And then Daniela says, you can do that in Lightroom, but you always have to build a new mask. Yeah. So in the previous version of Lightroom, before they refined the masking tools, right? Uh, there used to be like each adjustment brush. So let me repaint this. And I've been using Lightroom since I got into photography. So I was devastated when I jumped over to using ON1, and I didn't figure this out until tonight. So I'm actually a little embarrassed that it took me until tonight to figure this out. But essentially, what I'm doing right here inside of ON1, where I'm making all these different edits. And I got this technique from Serge Ramali, or Photo Serge on YouTube. When I was like learning how to use Lightroom, he was like the dude that I was learning from. And what he would do is he would go into the local adjustments tab and make all these radial filters and put them, he would make them much smaller than what I have here, right? And it would be like, I just want to put a little bit of light in this one area, right? And then he'll go somewhere else and do another one, and so forth and so on, and just made like these amazing pieces of art. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. And then when I got ON1, I can't believe that I didn't figure this out until tonight. But I could never get to this stage, mostly because I guess they were just way too large, because you don't draw them in with ON1. You just click and then you have to resize them. So if there's one thing that I would like to get to with ON1 versus Lightroom, is the fact that you can draw your own radial mask and you don't have to resize it, because it just comes in at whatever the default size is, and then you have to make it make sense. So let me go ahead and reset that. Hopefully that made sense. Get back to the comments here. And then Sean says, have you tried Affinity Photo? It opens PSD files and exports to PSD2. Yeah, so I actually have Affinity Photo and I do use that. There are certain tools inside of Photoshop that allow me to make my edits a lot faster. I shoot headshots and they're not always the cleanest when it comes to the background, and using the content aware fill inside of Photoshop makes it a lot easier. And then with the marketing directors that I'm sending these files to, knowing that it's in the native Photoshop large format makes it a little bit more peace of mind for me to collaborate with all of these marketing or these art directors and things of that sort. So that's really the main reason why I have Photoshop. But that's tied to my business lines of account. So for like all of my personal work, I'm inside of ON1 for 99 or 90% of the time. And then I'll use some of my plugins for the other 9%. And then sometimes, and very rare for my personal work, I'll go into Photoshop. So that's just kind of where I am with it. My business pays for me to have Photoshop, which works out great because then it makes the subscription model not such a big deal because I'm not paying out of pocket for it. It's a part of the work that I'm getting. So if I get one client a year, my subscription is paid for that entire year. So it just kind of works out that way. Thankfully, I get more than one client a year, so I haven't ran into any financial burdens with the subscription model just yet. And then let's see. Sean said, I didn't know you could use multiple bugs on one mask. Yeah. Hey, I just learned that tonight. And I guess I knew that you could, but I always got the opposite effect of what I was going for. It's kind of like it was like a paint out of the mask. So if I wanted to refine the mask, and it just didn't work the way that I expected it to. And Daniela learned the same thing. So we're learning tonight. I'm glad that we're all learning. And then Daniela said, I did, Sean. I can't get really used to it. Oh, okay. Yeah, the question was to Daniela. Got it. My bad. All right. Yeah, I have the entire Affinity suite too. I got it on a discount, so I was like, yeah, I'll just get it all. And I love using Affinity Photo. I want to grab more photo, or not more photos. I want to work more inside of Affinity Photo. I just haven't gotten to that point yet. So hopefully, in 2023, I get more into Affinity Photo, and then that that Sean said that it makes sense, everything that I was talking about. Okay. So we talked about local adjustments, and I'm just looking over here at my Venn diagram to see what else, because what we haven't talked about was presets, and that's something that I really want to talk about, because I think a lot of people will appreciate the fact that presets, they really do get you going, right? So like if I come to this minimalist, this is a raw image, no edits applied to it. If I come over here to the tone and color, no edits are applied to this image at all. I can just click on this. Let's say that I like this one, right? Which actually I kind of do like this one. I think that it's a little too heavy-handed for me. So I can come over to effects, and where this opacity slider at the top is, I can just blend this into the original image, and maybe that is where I like it. Okay. This is subjective. You can make this work the way that you want it to work. But essentially, it just added in all of these filters that I didn't have to go one by one to add in. For whatever reason, ON1 2023, it likes to expand all of the filters in the effect stack. I personally like one filter at a time because I'm not jumping between them like that. But anyhow, it added 4 filters for me. Now, let me add an additional filter, and I'm going to add a sunshine filter. And sunshine filters, they just brighten things up. We'll bring this over here, saturate it a little bit, and maybe even pull up the amount. I'm just trying to throw something in here to show you the way that these things could work for creating a preset. But let's say like this is an amazing work of art and I want to apply this to all of my images moving forward. Well, I can hit this little downward box, or I guess this box with a downward arrow, and this is going to open up my preset pane. And I've been working on some AI presets that I'm still working on them. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'm still working on them. We'll see how well they come out. But what I can do is I can hit this drop down for each of these categories and create a preset. And this is no different than the preset dialog box that you get with Lightroom. Whenever you click on create a preset, and it gives you the dialog box of, okay, you said you want to make a preset. What do you want to put in there? Well, I get a few options here. I never, or if I do, I'll very rarely do I leave the develop option selected. If I do leave anything selected inside of the develop, it's always under the color and tone, and it'll be the camera profile. So it's really only one thing. And that's just because for some presets, the camera profile really does set the stage, because it modifies the algorithm that ON1 uses to read the raw file. And you can only do this with raw files. So sometimes I know that because of how I built that particular effect, the preset has to have that camera profile. Otherwise, everything else will be irrelevant. And whenever I'm creating a preset, I usually don't do any of the exposure inside of the develop module. I use a tone enhancer, or I'll use the local adjustments tab, and I'll explain the reason why I do that here in a second, to modify the overall exposure. Now, down here where the effects are, If you are working with the AI adaptive presets and you've masked in some of these effects using the Super Select AI, you'll definitely want to hit the apply mask. All right. But that is very experimental right now. And then, of course, we have the local adjustments, and I leave the local adjustments on or without the mask. All right. So I just wanted to hit cancel there, but normally you would hit save and it would go into one of your folders. And I even have a preset working ground. This is where I just test out a bunch of random presets, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Like this is my black and white working ground. So whenever I'm like, okay, I want to work in black and white, and I want to create an image, but I want to modify every single aspect of the image. This gives me my working space so I can start to develop that image. But if I come over here to develop, go into develop, you can see I haven't modified anything over here in the develop module. And that's because every image is going to need its own enhancement, so to speak, inside of the develop setting. So I don't spend too much time trying to create that. But what I will do, if I know that there's something that I really need to modify for the entire image, then what I'll do is I'll come over to local and I will make this particular mask inverted. And so now the effect is happening over the entire image. Double click that and I'll create whatever mask or whatever effect that I want on my image. The reason why I do it inside of local, if I'm going to do some sort of tone enhancement or whatever, is because the tone enhancer, and I'm just going to get down to the tone enhancer so you guys can see that. Once I close this one, as you can see, I have a bunch of dodging and burning curves in there so I can paint in. Again, this is a workspace, not a preset, but I've saved it as a preset so I can just start working. Let me know if that didn't make sense in the comment section, and I'd love to clarify that. But the tone enhancer, you notice that it has exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, but it doesn't have midtones. If I come over to local, I have exposure, contrast, highlights, midtones, shadows, whites, and blacks. So I get the midtone slider. And what I have found, especially when I'm working in black and whites, the midtones is really where I can get that brighter look to the image, or that darker look that kind of fades well, especially if I'm doing like a faded black look. I just really enjoy using the midtone slider. So that's why I come over to the local adjustments tab versus using the tone enhancer. Now you're probably like, well, Chris, why do you even have a tone enhancer on your effect stack if you don't use it? Well, I use the tone enhancer to give me my base separation between my white and my black in the black and white image. So that on its own starts to create the dynamic contrast that I need in my black and whites. And I can go on and on about this. It's an art form, right? Photography is subjective, and the editing digital darkroom is even more subjective in how you manipulate the pixels that make up the image you are working on. So I don't want to, like nerd out on that, but essentially I have a workspace that I enjoy, and I've saved that as a preset. So I can easily just come in and start saying, okay, how do I want to edit this photo? This is how I want to edit the photo. And then I go to town on it. Okay. So food for thought. That's a lot of the editing stuff. Now, the rest of the things that I'm going to show you, I'm just going to hit cancel and hit OK. We're going to go back to my library. And the rest of the things that I'm going to show you are really specific to the fact that ON1 can do a lot of different things. ON1 can do a lot of the things that Lightroom can do when it comes to organization. I like to organize. I don't necessarily think I have the best organization system, but I like to have my photos organized and collected a certain way. And that happens on my actual hard drive. Now, if you're familiar with Lightroom, you have to create a catalog, and then inside of your catalog, you create your file structure. If there was one thing that I was not a fan of inside of Lightroom, it was the catalog, because the way that I stored my files on the hard drive is not how it was stored inside of my photo editing application. And I would go looking for a file where it's like, okay, I thought this would be inside of here, but it actually is not inside of there. It's over here. It just, for me, it didn't resonate very well, so I wasn't a huge fan of it. However, with ON1, what you are looking at is your actual hard drive structure, your browse structure. So I put everything into one photo drive. Okay. All of my pictures are on well, not all of them. I have a backup drive. Okay. So I got the physical hard drive, which is like right here on my desk. That's where all my photos that I work on when I'm working inside of ON1. And that's like the first place that they're copied to. And then about once a week or so, I have another hard drive that I plug into the computer, and I back up all of my images. And I have a very unique system for that. If that's something you're interested in seeing, let me know. But essentially, what I get to do here is I can categorize the way that everything is on my hard drive. I can find those folders over here and then go edit those photos. And then the XMP file, or the information that is tied to an image that tells ON1 the last time this image was edited, these are the settings that were used. And then it just applies that, because again, this is non-destructive. The way that you make a program non-destructive is that there has to be a secondary file that goes along with the image. And this is ON1's method of managing that. It saves the XMP file. If I were to right click this and show in Finder, I'll pull my Finder window over here so you can see. So I have a photo, which is inside of the folder, and then I have the XMP file. Now, Lightroom does something similar, but all of the non-destructive edits are saved inside of a catalog. They're not saved inside of the actual file. All right. Saved outside of the catalog or external to the catalog, whereas ON1 saves the XMP file right next to the image. So if I were to send this image to someone else who's using ON1 Photo Raw, I would have, if I want them to get the exact same edit, I'd have to send them the photo along with the XMP file. So that way they can edit it non-destructively as well. All right. And then I would also have to make sure that they have the same version of ON1, or that I didn't use any tools inside of a later version of ON1 if they're working with an older version. And that was kind of the challenge that I had with Photoshop. And I'll pause there because I see that there was a comment from Sean. Let me back up for a second. Okay, Daniela says, same happens with ON1. Those catalogs are a burden. I use external hard drives. Yep. That's one of the biggest gripes that I had with Lightroom. And then Sean says he backs up to my NAS. I don't know why I'm not actually displaying these. I could just display them. Yeah, and then sidecard files, FTW. Oh, for the win. Okay. Man, you'd think I would know some stuff. And then we got Mark in the house. I thought the ON1 sidecard was called ON1 Photo. Ah, okay. So an ON1 photo is actually anytime that you layer a file inside of ON1. So let me see if I have some. I can't remember the last time that I did a ON photo file. So I'm just going to create one. So, or actually, I do know where an ON photo file is because I don't want to, it'll take a little while for the .on photo file to save. Please show us the luminosity mask. Okay, yeah, I'll definitely show you the luminosity mask. That is way too easy. In fact, we'll do that now, and then I'll get to Mark's question about the sidecar file, because I think that or the sidecar on photo file, if I didn't already answer it. So for a luminosity mask, I'm going to hit local, and we're just going to pull down the exposure. Come on. All right. And then we'll click right here on the actual mask, and we'll click on Lumen. And essentially what just happened, if I hit the letter O, the brightest areas of the image were targeted, and the darkest areas of the image, let me get some more screen real estate here, and I'll even close that out. All right. So the brightest areas of the image were targeted, and the darkest areas of the images were not targeted. So essentially, this adjustment of exposure went into all of the bright areas. So I'm taking the brightest areas of the image, at least with this particular edit, and I'm making them darker. And all the luminosity mask, because I'm showing the mask right now, right? If I hit the letter O, this is the effect that is being had on the image. If I pull this even further, you'll see that all I'm being left with is the absolute darker areas, because I'm pulling down the exposure there. Let me reset that. And now I'm back to just my base exposure of the image. Well, you can actually modify these masks. So maybe I want to target just the darkest sections of the photo. I can hit invert. And now only the darkest areas of the photo are going to get whatever adjustment that I make here. So maybe I want to open those darker areas. So if I hit the letter O, and I'll reset this so you can see it's really dark right now, but I want to pull up the shadows of the darkest areas and maybe even the highlights, right? We're just making a weird edit here because I want to make sure that it comes through on YouTube. And then I can even pull up on the exposure, and it's only impacting or it's targeting those darker areas. Now, let me go ahead and reset all of these. Okay. And I'll even reset the mask and re-click Lumen. So you can modify this mask and you can make it do whatever you want. Let me pause for a second. There's a question. The only place to work with Lumen is on the locals tab. No. So anywhere that you have access to the masking, the masking tools inside of ON1, you can activate a luminosity mask. So quickly, I'll show you. We'll go here to color balance. And I don't know if this is the best way. In fact, it's not the best way. The best way, I'll click on Add Filter, and I will click on Photo Filter. And I'm going to increase the amount of this blue all the way up. So now I can click on the mask, and I have the ability to click on Lumen. And if I want to apply the luminosity mask only to the brightest areas, then I just did it. Sorry, I had to clear my throat there. Now, what I was going to show is that you can start to modify these masks, right? You don't have to take it at face value of what it was. What I can do is I can start to close in on the window. And since I'm targeting the brightest areas, if I hit the letter O, because I want to see what I'm doing, I can pull down on my window, and you can see that I am now excluding some of those brightest areas, and it's only targeting whatever the brightest areas are between this point and all the way down to the darkest area in the image. So hopefully that answered the question. Yeah, and Sean already answered it too. Every effect has the lumen and the masking option. That's what happens to my photos. Oh, hey, look now. Hey, it happens. And truthfully, the luminosity mask, let me just reset this. This is not one of those areas where I would use the luminosity mask. I like to use the luminosity mask for contrast type edits. That's just me personally. Whenever I use the luminosity mask, I'm mostly going for a contrasty edit, and I want this to be in a very specific place. So if I hit the letter O, I get my mask. Now I'm back on a local adjustments. And this is where I just naturally gravitate towards adding the luminosity mask. And if I grab my levels adjustment, you see that I'm starting to make less of a transition between the darkest point and the middle gray. And I'm making a wider transition between the middle grays of the image, or I guess I shouldn't even say the middle grays, the darkest point and to the middle tonal value. That's so, the 50% brightness, which I guess would be gray. So I guess I'm not incorrect there. But essentially, I'm making the transition between the darkest point to the center grays of the image shorter. So it starts to become a little bit more not transparent, but apparent that there's a dark area, and then it starts to get brighter, right? There's not as much dark areas that this mask is affecting. And then from the middle gray, or whatever we want to call the middle gray, the middle point, all the way up to the brightest pixel values is getting the effect, or the transition is spreading out a lot longer, which is why it's giving the effect that it's brighter. But as I start to pull this down, you'll see that it gets even brighter. And the reason for that is I am excluding, or I'm making the transition between here to here. Like this is pure white, okay? Or the brightest pixel. I am now saying the brightest value in my luminosity mask is here. The darkest value is here. If I were to pull this to the right, you can see I'm starting to introduce darker values, and I feel like I'm not explaining this the best. Like I can see it in my head of how this works. Let's see if I can just illustrate it. So maybe what we'll do is throw in some contrast. We'll expose a little bit and pull down on the blacks. Maybe pull up on the shadows. Let me see how that's doing. Not too bad. Now, I also like to feather my mask because I think that's what helps it look way more natural. Like if you look at that, you'll be like, oh man, that actually looks a little bit more smooth. Definitely recommend you use the, the feather tool. If you are using any mask really inside of ON1, the feather tool is your friend. You definitely want to use the feather tool, or at least I think you do. So let me hit O, and if I were to turn this off and on, you will see that I'm affecting the brightness of the overall image, and that's because I pulled up on the exposure. But what it's targeting is the brightest areas of the image, because if I hit the letter O, you can see all of the dark areas in the image. They're not actually getting this adjustment. only the brightest areas are getting it. And in fact, if I come up to mask and I go to view mode, we'll go red overlay. If I hit the letter O, you can see this a little bit better. Everywhere where red is, everywhere that has red on the image is not getting the effect. So if I turn that off, you can see that those are still really, really dark areas. But everywhere that you don't see red, that means the effect is being applied. Now, this red overlay doesn't really do a good job at showing the gradation between the darkest points and the brightest points, especially when you start to manipulate your levels here. You can kind of see it, but I like the gray mask personally. That's the one that I would go with, because the grayscale, because I've been using it for so long, I know what I'm looking at and I know what I'm thinking. You know, photography is visual, so I see it in my head and then that's what I go with. Hopefully that answered your question about luminosity mask. But if it didn't, please let me know and I'll see if I can clarify it a little bit more. Let me go back to the comments. I seen Mark, he dropped another. I think that is what I created when coming from LRC. No, when you came from Lightroom, Mark, you would not have created a .on photo file because that's actually an edit file. When you came from Lightroom, you likely created some form of a catalog that it took all of those edits and it made XMP files for you. It found the image wherever the image was being saved and then created a .xmp for that particular image. So when you opened it in ON1, it had those adjustments as best as it can get them from Lightroom to ON1. If there was a compatible tool or filter that can make that look. Otherwise, you would probably have, if I remember correctly, I would have to go back to the email that you shared with me, but I think you mentioned that you had to create some DNG files. And if you created DNG files, then all of your edits would have been baked into those files as non-destructive edits. But I could be getting that confused with a bunch of different inputs that I got about the ON1. Okay, so it does come from the DNG files that have been modified, I think. There were no XMP files added. Interesting. Yeah, because I was going to show you. Sorry, this is what happens when you get off script. I think it's actually in this file. I should have some .on photo. You know what? Why am I making this difficult? I could just use the search function here. File type on photo. So you can't see, but I have my search filter over here. It's on my second screen because as soon as you hit the X, then it exits you out of search. I don't know why that's a thing, but yeah. So these are my on photo files, and we'll just open up this one because this one, you know, it's the one that's most recent in my mind because I literally just did this one yesterday. You started again this morning. Creating a. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you were saying there, Mark. That you started again this morning. But a .on photo file. That's what this is. If you look at the top here, the .on photo file, it has 2 layers inside of it. So this is one of those areas or one of those files where if you use a .on photo, or I'm sorry, if you use the layer-based system, it will create a .on photo file. these can only be read inside of ON1. But, and in essence, they are non-destructive unless you do some destructive things in the layers module, if that makes sense. So if I start doing merge layers or delete stamp layers and stuff like that, then I am being destructive. And I don't think that that's what you would want to do. But the cool thing here is if I hit the search button and I type, or I put in the category file type, and this is one of those areas that I think is good inside of ON1. You can search files inside of Lightroom. So this works essentially the same, just different. And sometimes this works really well, and other times ON1 does not search very well. But that's a conversation for a different day. But I can put file type, and then I can put the delineator, which is in this case, and then whatever I want. So if I want to find all of my TIFF files, there you go. There's all of my TIFF files. And this is also inside of current photos, which is why it's moving really, really fast. If I were to hit this drop down and hit search all photos, it would take a little bit longer. Or you can search catalog photos. So let me go back to the comments here. Add a layer, and you should have an on photo too. Okay. Lovely way to, yeah, no, I definitely work with you. You guys, I want to bring value to everyone who spends time on this channel. So, yeah. Oh, you restarted your Lightroom migration. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Wait, for 2023, why did you have to restart your migration? If you had already migrated over to 2022, the catalog, if you catalog the files, should have already been read by 2023. You should not have had to redo that. Like my catalog files, which are right here, which is all inside the personal work, and I send this entire folder. So anytime, and this is just how I do it. Anytime that I upload a photo to the personal work folder on my photos drive, it is synced to the cloud as the ON1 360, where I can select like the hard drive and filter through. So at any given point, again, I use a second laptop as my alternate workflow station, if you will. So when I'm out traveling, as long as I have internet, I can access the folder that has all of my photos in it, and I can get back here to my hard drive that's plugged into my computer. All right. Now, if there's something that I need to work on a little bit faster and I really want to work on the tablet, which the mobile version of ON1 I am not a fan of, I don't recommend. I wanted to recommend it, but that is one of the downsides, and that could be a whole nother conversation. But if I want to work on something really, really fast, then what I can do is I can add it to a album, and then, so this one is probably a good one. These are all photos that I can work on my tablet because it's synced to the ON1 360 cloud service, and it transitions over to my tablet. I can work on the RAW version or the JPEG, and I'll be good to go there. Again, I don't do it too often, primarily because I spend most of my time working on images on the main ON1, like the desktop version of ON1. So that's the reason for that. And I know there's my Gettysburg trip, because this is the folder that I was working off of. I went to Gettysburg yesterday, so that's where all these images are coming from. And I was on a historic ride or walk or whatever you want to call it. And so I took some photos while I was there, and yeah. All right. Well, I do get some of those side files as well. Yeah. So anytime that you, even if you don't edit the photo, all right, I'm almost confident that all of these files, I need to go, I wonder if I can open it from the film strip. So if I right click, well, of course, so when it's loading here, it's actually creating a XMP file for your image. So if I right click this, and nope, you got to be in the browse. So we'll hit cancel for a second and hit OK. And if I right click on any image, really doesn't matter which one, it's going to give me this little pop-up menu, and I can hit reveal in folders or show in Finder. So if I click show in Finder, it's probably okay. So it's on this screen now. Every file that you, and I actually used ON1 to upload these into my file server here, or I guess not a server, to my hard drive. So it creates the XMPs while it's actually uploading into ON1. So these ones already have XMPs. And then of course, I have these files in my cataloged folder, so that way they process a little bit faster, which is not the same type of catalog as Lightroom, by the way. Different type of catalog and how it works. But you will get these XMP files for every image that you make or that you upload into ON1. Or you'll have a folder of files here, and I can actually show you this. If I come here, and so as you can see, these are all like the thumbnails that I use for YouTube for the live streams. And these are all the thumbnails that I use this month so far. So if I were to open this inside of ON1, which is the ON1 versus Luminar JPEG, which I'm just going to navigate to it over here because it is inside of this folder. And then we will go live stream by year. And, you know, I could just do it in the drop downs over here, but I'm being lazy. I guess not lazy. I'm just doing it the long way. So now I am in the folder that has all of those files, and I am going to open this up. As of right now, there is not an XMP file inside of this folder, okay? And that's because I've never opened any of these images inside of ON1. These are all JPEGs that I would upload to YouTube. So I'm going, like I said, I was going to open the Luminar file here. So if I click on that and I hit edit, it's going to load down here. And as soon as I start to make edits, so we'll just add a filter, and it's analyzing the image. I don't think it was done loading entirely. And this is just the way it goes. So now we'll just add a grunge filter. Why not? For fun, right? I'll just crank that all the way up. And then once I hit done, let me come back out and go back in. Now, where did your XMP file? Now, ON1's making a liar out of me. The XMP file absolutely should have shown up in here, and I'm not sure why it's not in there. So now I gotta go figure out where the sidecar file is, because that's where it's supposed to be. And it is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Well, for the sake of not further embarrassing myself, I'll have to go and dig into that and figure out what happened, because the XMP file was supposed to show up there so that way they stay contained, and I'm not sure why it didn't show up there. That's very disappointing, but hopefully that makes some sense of how the XMP files work, or for the side files. I promise you that when you make an edit, it does save in the folder where the file is. I just don't know why it didn't do that here. That's very unfun. Okay, back to the comments. Let's see here. Mark, I'm currently getting an .on1 file for every image, even JPEGs. Oh, okay. I wonder if the .on1 file is like a pre-container for the XMP. But that is interesting. And then you uninstalled a while back because of all the crashes and didn't intend to stay on ON1. Okay, that's fair. But 2023 seems much more reliable and more feature-rich than Neo and Mylio. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of features inside of ON1, and I think that it is more feature-rich than Mylio and Neo. I like the workflow in ON1 versus Neo and the cataloging. I wasn't a fan of Mylio when I did try it. I was on the trial and I wasn't a fan of it. So yeah, I can understand that. I don't have the cloud sync, but still I do get those ON1 sidecards as well. Even if I just only look at my photos to see if they are in focus. Yeah, so you'll get the sidecar because the sidecar is a non-destructive generated file that ON1 builds in order to tell itself, hey, this is what the editor of this file did to the image last. It's like a history record, essentially, of what happened to the file. So, in fact, if I were to open this, in theory, at the risk of embarrassing myself again, hopefully I won't, but the grunge effect is here. So if I click on history, and of course I embarrass myself again, but the grunge effect should have been in there. I'm going to add a bleach bypass because I don't know why. I don't know why this doesn't want to actually show up in the folder when I hit reveal in Finder, because the XMP file, it is it's the instructions. That's probably the better way of putting it. Show in Finder. Yeah, and it still doesn't want to give me that. So my bad. It's the instructions for ON1 to know what to do with the file the next time it's open. So sorry, I'm getting through these comments a little slow and a little bit later. Let's see. Daniela also said, what I mean is the following: for borrowing only, or I'm sorry, for browsing only, I get the ON1 sidecar, but if I edit, I also get the XMP sidecar. That means 2 for the edited. Interesting. I only get 1. And you know, like what I've learned about ON1, if there's anything that I've learned about ON1, is everyone has different experiences, and the way that ON1 works for one person may not be the same way that it works for another, especially when we start talking about like technical things like this. And I would also ask, are you on a PC or a Mac? Because there may be some things that are PC specific where more of those features like the XMPs and stuff like that. Because, oh, you know what? I think I know what happens. Because I think the XMPs are actually for the metadata. now that I think about it. And so that means everything that I was saying is completely out the window. So there you have it. Let's see if that is true. So if I click here, and this is, we'll put a keyword in here, train, comma. Okay. So now that we have train in there, I'm going to go back to the folder and let's see. Acache should have, maybe not. I got to go and find out why the XMP files aren't showing up, because I did a video on this in the past, and the XMP files, they showed up whenever I made the edits, but for whatever reason, they're not showing up anymore. And so I know I'm not crazy, and I'm definitely not a liar, but ON1 is behaving differently than how it used to behave. So I apologize if I'm confusing anyone out there. So I'll leave the XMP conversation alone for a second here. Yeah, and let's see. I feel like I didn't get to everyone's comments here. Okay, so Daniela's using a Mac. Everyone's using a Mac. Sean's on a PC. No shame in that. I started with a PC. And then I went to college, and part of my tuition, they gave me a MacBook Pro, and I fell in love with Macs ever since then. Yeah, it could just be a lag with Finder. Yeah, for the sake of not messing up the live stream, which seems to be working pretty well today, I am not going to relaunch Finder because I don't want to mess up anything. But there could be a lag with Finder, which that is disappointing. But I'm like very confident that the XMP files do work the way that I expressed that they did previously. Yeah, you're right. I agree. XMP is for metadata, but then look in Finder to see what you get from an edited photo. The ON1 committee. Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, I love this program. I really do. Like I said, I use it for 90% of my work, but there are just some things about ON1 that I'm like, I have no idea why it works the way that it works. And I can't replicate some things, on demand, at least. I can usually replicate it, you know, hours of me sitting here at the computer, clicking over some stuff. But, yeah. So I'm just looking at the tools here. Okay. I think I covered pretty much everything that is inside of the Venn diagram. That, again, not an exhaustive diagram, but I covered keywords, or at least look, there's keywords. All right. They're right there. You click a photo, you type in a keyword, boom, you got a keyword. I did cover split toning, HSL. I talked about curves, presets. We went over those as well. Local adjustments, noise, cataloging. That's the entire system of ON1. It's just a huge catalog that has a very robust editor on the back end. That's essentially how that works. And then we have the AI masking, which I didn't talk about too much, but I will talk about that before we depart. And then we have the adaptive presets I didn't talk about, so I'll group those together. Auto develop, that's something that is actually very unique, I think, which is why I have it over here as well, AI auto, because of the way that it works. Like, both programs have it, but I think there's something more unique about the AI auto inside of ON1 versus Lightroom. The healing brush, cropping, and then we didn't talk about the replacing of the color. So let me go over that really quickly, because if you are using Lightroom, and you're like, okay, I get it. I replace colors all the time with the local tab. Well, then let's go ahead and open up this picture of the train. And I want to make the yellow part of the train purple. I'm just choosing random colors. And I have never come to this train image before and edited it to purple. I missed the key drop AI mask or quick mask as well. The new version is not my favorite. I'm not a fan of it. So yeah, I'm with you on that, Sean. But okay, so oh boy, I don't even want to use the AI masking right now. We'll do a different demonstration for that. But I'm going to click on replace color because there's its own filter inside of ON1. And as long as you have, I believe, Photo Raw 2021, then you will have the AI edit, or I'm sorry, the replace color. And thank you, Daniela. This is a nice photo. It is not my photo. This is from Unsplash. A person by the name of Akshay. I think that's how you say the name. I don't mean to butcher this individual's name. I don't know how to say it though. But it is on Unsplash. And I do have the link to the Unsplash in the description box below. So if you want to go and, let that person know that they have a really cool photo, I would greatly appreciate that. And I'm sure they would as well. But nonetheless, I'm just using it for demonstration purpose. Hitting the replace color. So I'll get to the replace color because Sean says he's never replaced color. All right. Sorry. I see like shiny things and then it's like, ooh, a squirrel. All right. The way that the replace color works is actually very simple. You add the filter and then where it says target color, you hit the little eye picker and you come over to the thing that you want to change. And voila, we have just changed the train color. Now, I said that I want to make this train go from yellow to purple. Well, what's cool about the color picker, and it seems like ON1 figured out that people want more flexibility and range control over their colors whenever they are using their tools. So outside of the color balance, because the color balance, you don't get to do this, but all I have to do is drag this over here to something that looks purple. And maybe we want a brighter purple. That's like pink. So maybe darker and probably more towards red. Okay. So there's the color, but it just looks like pink. Well, what I can do is pull up on the range and see if that helps with anything, which now it's going all the way off into the grass, which we don't want that. So I'll pull that back down, probably even more here. Yeah, it does look hot pink. And this is one of those tools. Not everyone will need a use for it, but if you do want to use it, there we go. So if I pull up on the brightness, it's definitely more hot pink than it is purple, but that's because of the color there, because maybe I need to be more, there we go. I wasn't close enough to the blues. And maybe I can darken that down, brighten it up, maybe brighten it up a little bit. It's not perfect. It's not the it's not the color purple that I was going for. I was going for like Barney the dinosaur, if you guys know who Barney is. Yeah, I mean, we could go for the Pepto train. Like, I got no problem with that, right? Pepto-Bismol train for the win. But yeah, nonetheless, the real thing that I wanted to show here is inside of Lightroom, there was this big thing where, when you could change the hue of something and, everyone's like, oh, whoa, I really want to use Lightroom so I can change the hue of hair or eye colors or anything like that. I just really wanted to show that ON1 has that capability just as well. Uh, and you can really hone this in, but also you can use different blend modes. Now, I don't know if the blend modes would be beneficial, and this is also not masked to the train. This is a color range mask essentially for the effect alone. So, if I want to only adjust the color, then I can use color. If I want to only adjust the hue but leave the brightness and the saturation alone, then you can use a hue blend mode. But that's what's really cool about using ON1 is the fact that you can use these blend modes. And maybe I don't want it in the shadows. I can pull it out of any shadowed area, which would be this area here where a normal reflection of the original color was already at. Let's see what the comments have. Can't you just mask out the affected parts that you don't want? Yeah, absolutely. And that's the beauty of ON1. So what I could do is invert this, and then I can take a brush and with paint in, I can just paint this over the areas that I actually want this to apply to. So now, and I don't have to paint like perfectly because it's only applying it to that color range. So I can paint this as wildly as I want, even if I wanted to come like just over the front here. As long as that color range isn't in the area that I'm painting that I don't want to affect, right? So now I have the entire mask or the train masked with this color of Pepto-Bismol pink, and then Sean said, I do street photography, so will likely never replace color. Yeah, if you don't have to do it, then absolutely. The goal here is really just to help show people that if you're transitioning from Lightroom, there are tools available inside of ON1 that can give you the exact same workflow that you've had previously. But I do appreciate that, Sean. Like, not everyone's going to use it. So now what we'll do is the the AI masking inside of ON1. Now, this is very hit or miss, and I'm not knocking ON1, not trying to be negative, but this is a very hit or miss thing. Sometimes it works great, and other times not so great. But let's try and mask the mountain in the background because it's reading a mountain, so we'll hit the mountain. And, I guess a basic adjustment that you may want to do to the mountain is add contrast. So dynamic contrast is a really popular filter inside of ON1. And let's turn this off and on, see what it's doing. It's just bringing some nice detail to these trees. And this is actually an edit that I like. Yeah, and it's not actually affecting anything on this horizon line or ridge line. So that's also pretty good. But so, and yeah, it perfectly understood if you don't replace any colors of things. I just wanted to share that because there are a few people that may be interested in that if they use Lightroom and they like to modify colors of things. But with that being said, the Super Select AI, I selected the mountains and then I applied dynamic contrast to the mountains and it added in some contrast back there. I can, vibrance it up. So now those hills are really green and vibrant. That could be an edit that you want. So it works. If I hit the letter O, you can see what the mask looks like. Again, I am a huge fan, and this is just me. I like to add feather to all of my masks. All right. And that just makes it blend, in my opinion, a lot better. If you don't want to add a feather, and this is a lot of feather, right? I'm going 28 pixels if that's what that is. I don't know what this is even in reference to. It's just 28. You know that, like I'll call it the volume control of feather. And if I were to pull this down to 14, that could work too. It's all about the subtle adjustment. I think that is very important, but that's one thing of Super Select. Now, if I grab the Super Select tool, you can see I can grab the train here, the sky. I can grab the sky, and we will, let's see. We'll add a LUT into the sky. Why not? We'll throw in nickel. Yeah, that sounds like it'll work. Hit add. And so now we have a LUT in the sky for nickel. And it is what it is. Like, it's a dark gray sky. I'm not sure if that's the look that, anyone would really want to go for. But it is a look, and I think it could work. And clearly, it's masking. Look, I'm not trying to, again, knock ON1. I don't gravitate towards this in my editing or at all, because for the longest time I haven't had it. And now that I have it, I'm not really confident I know what to do with it, because it's just not as consistent. Like if you look here along the ridge line, that's not very consistent. And that's pretty good contrast, right? That it could have figured out, like it tried to get in there. And again, this is where that feather may help out, but it really just blurs that area. And you can go in and clean this up. So I don't want to be like the nitpicker or anything crazy like that. And I really just blurred that out a whole bunch more. But still, now it's starting to get like that halo effect around the ridge line there, and especially around the train. It's not perfect. It could be better. I'll leave it at that. But there is AI masking. What is the blue halo on the top of the mountains? Yeah. So this is just, it's, if you are referring, let me get rid of this LUT. If you're referring to this area along the ridge line here, that's just in the photo. I imagine something happened when the photo was taken, because it's not something that I've added into it. That's just the file that came out of that I got from Unsplash. But I imagine, or not I imagine, this photo was processed before I got it. And based on how someone processes their image, they could have had banding issues because they were working in maybe an 8-bit color space instead of 16-bit. There's a lot of different reasons that this banding issue up here could have happened. This could have been upsampled. Like, for all I know, this could have been shot on an iPhone. I don't know if there's any, there's no camera info here. But then again, this is a 5,000 by 4,000 megapixel image. So this could have been shot, well, I guess that doesn't really matter with all the upscaling software that's available now. It could have been shot on a cell phone and then upscaled to 5,000 by 4,000. I guess I gave you a very long answer that probably could have been sufficed with. I don't know what that is. Sorry. Let's see here. Sean says, keep drop was superior. Keep drop was superior. Hope they bring that back alongside the new AI masking. quick mask, yeah. KWSK quick select, I think is what that is shorthand for. Man, you guys are really testing my shorthand knowledge tonight. I like it. I like it. And then Daniela says, yes, the original. Thank you so much. Yeah. The original. You didn't like the nickel sky, the crazy gray sky? It's all right. Yeah, I hate halos too. And when you're zoomed out like this, it's not so bad. And really, very few people are looking at an image like this. They look at the image. Oh, I guess I should probably be on one, and maybe not even that far back. But we see images like this most of the time. If you're shooting for the digital age, right? It's not very large. This, you know, you could probably get away with some super select AI on something like this, right? So if I were to click the train and add in an adjustment, we'll go with something like a vibrance, right? Hit add, and then we'll hit done. And now that I have that vibrance removed or even added in, it actually works pretty good, right? And if I were to increase the exposure, you can see the mask and you'll be like, man, that doesn't look good. But this vibrance slider is pulled up pretty high. And I think that this mask works fine. So it really does depend on the subject, what you're trying to do with it. You're not getting these very precise masks with the super select. But I think you're getting precise enough to quickly start working and making your adjustments the way that you might need to. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, no worries about the typo. You meant to put mask. Okay, no worries. We're all good, Sean. And then you make nature photography. Okay, birds, plants, but also macro. Nice, nice. You know, if you're already using ON1 Photo Raw 2023, then you can absolutely go and experiment. But I got a bear photo, and this is primarily because during the ON1 the ON1 Super Selector AI Quick Mask demonstration, they had a picture of a bear and they showed like, look at how good the mask is. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go find a bear and I'm gonna have him against the busiest background that I can get him in. And I don't even know if this is a real bear or if this is like a mannequin or a stuffed bear. Obviously not a teddy bear. That's just staged. But if I hit the letter K to get the super select, it finds the animal pretty good. And if I click on them, and we'll just throw a bleach bypass. I'm just throwing weird stuff on here so it can come through on the stream. It doesn't have to be the best of the best, right? By adding that and then hitting the letter O, this actually does a pretty good job with the mask, right? I wouldn't have painted something that good. So I'm thankful for the way that works. But where I think the mask kind of falls apart is with situations like this. Like I click on that, I click here, and now I have the entire background selected, which is good, but I'm not entirely sure what I got when I selected those. So if I go to add filter, as I can hover over this and, you got natural ground and I think it's picking up some rocks here. So maybe this is actually doing really good for this image. And then flora is pretty much everything else, which is green, trees, stuff like that. So I can't be too mad about this. this is actually a pretty good selection, and overall a good mask and everything. So, but yeah, if you're doing nature photography, this works great. Now, where Super Select doesn't work as great is in the macro department. And if you guys have seen, you know what? Nope, that's an ON Photo. The ON Photo files, they just take too long to open up. But here's a soccer ball. We can, is this macro? Is it close up? I'm not entirely sure. I think it's more close up than anything else. But if I hit the letter K, it's thinking about the image. It's trying to process it. So we'll give it some time. Okay, so now I think it's done processing. And this is where I think ON1 really has a hard time. You would think it would be able to, at a minimum, and I'll click on add filter here. You would think at a minimum, and I don't know what it's doing. Now it's not even selecting the ball. So if I hover over here, I can select the ball, but it's selecting all this extra stuff in the background. That could be easy to fix and whatnot. But the point that I really want to make is you would think that it would be easier for ON1 to figure out, like, hey, here's a sphere looking thing. We'll select this, but we won't select anything else because this is the most in focus thing. And again, it's close up. So this is where I think you'll run into the issue. Yeah. LOL, we saw it with Sean. Yeah. Let's see. Daniela says, for nature photography, must be a little more perfected. Yeah, the mask. Usually we make masks on areas and leaves backgrounds darker and blurrier. Okay. So are you saying that you don't need the mask to be as good? Oh, looks must be a little more perfected. Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. So, yeah, that is ON1 in a nutshell. I did cover pretty much everything. I'm just looking at the list. I did cover pretty much everything that was on there. And I have been streaming for 2 hours. My wife's probably like, man, where are you at, Chris? You were only supposed to be there for an hour. And I went an additional hour, but I really appreciate you guys hanging out. Now, if you are on Vero, then go ahead and send me a message over on Vero. And I really appreciate, Daniela and Sean and Mark, and, everyone who came out to the stream. I really appreciate it. Even if you just kind of hung out in the audience, but didn't actually chat or anything. Appreciate you hanging out with me. And I would love to connect with you over on Vero if that's an app that you're using. If not, that's okay. Don't go get an app if you're not going to use it. But until the next time, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.